Welcome to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. We have a great episode up for you tonight, even though I'm tired. We were just talking about it. See, the bags is happening. But we have Rob Gutro back with us today. He's been on several times here on Edge of the Rabbit Hole. And our guest host for this evening is Chuck Banks, Charles Anthony. And he's filling in for Vanessa while she is still out in Ireland. Vanessa will be back with us next weekend. A couple of things real quick. First of all, YouTube has kind of changed up a couple little things around here. And so one of those happens to be the chat replay. So if you are not watching this right now at about 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, you're watching the replay. When you're watching the replay, because they keep the chat on the side now, it looks just like it's live. So there's been a little bit of confusion about that here. I guess it's been going on the past couple weeks now. So just to let you know, right now, those 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 8:30 Central, it's live. For everybody else, you're on a replay. So just needed to put that one out there. Also, Vanessa will be back with us next week, so we look forward to her return and talking about her adventures in Ireland. And next up on Inside the Upside Down is our episode on EVPs, which was a request from one of our Deep Down the Rabbit Hole patrons, Tom McNicholas. And that is one of those perks of being a Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patron is you can make requests for specific shows. So it's kind of a nice follow-up to our photo and video evidence video that we just did on Inside the Upside Down. So, all right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce Rob Gutro. So Rob, welcome back. Rob is a psychic medium. You're a meteorologist, you're an author, you do all kinds of things. You're a dog rescuer, you're an all-around great guy. So, and you have a new book out now, Ghosts of England, which we're going to talk about this evening. So, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. This is probably one of my favorites that I've actually written, and it was astounding to go on a vacation, not looking for anything, but everything came to me.
Everything came in. Well, go ahead and explain. Let's dive right into it.
Okay. All right. Well, back in 2012 and 2013, my husband and I took 2 vacations to England, and they were both about 10 days. And he's a big fan of the Tudors, which is, Henry VIII and the entire line of Tudors. So he arranged both trips, and I didn't know anything about the history of the Tudors. So it was all new to me. Anyway, wherever we went, there was some kind of entity that was trying to communicate with me. And in short, to give you kind of a tease of a number of things, I encountered a queen, the ghost of a queen, the ghost of a nobleman, the ghost of some peasants, some religious figures, just a bevy of people from a lot of different walks of life.
Well,
now,
go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, sorry, Mike. The queen, was it the Virgin Queen?
Yeah, I know. Well, Henry VIII hoped she was a Virgin Queen, but as it turned out, I don't think she was.
Was that the Katherine Howard hallway?
That was the Katherine Howard hallway, the haunted hallway in Hampton Court Palace. Mike, you know your ghosts.
I know a little King Henry VIII.
So Hampton Court Palace was probably one of the busiest paranormal places that we went. From Katherine Howard to a construction worker that died there that I didn't know anything about, of course, when I was walking through it, to many other ghosts. But I can tell you the story about Katherine Howard.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Katherine Howard, I believe, was Henry VIII's fourth wife. She was very young. I think she was the fourth one. I get confused because
he had so many. Yeah,
so many, right? Anyway, she was convicted of cheating.
Right.
And so, of course, she was beheaded. But when she found out that Henry VIII was going to behead her, she ran screaming down this particular hallway in Hampton Court Palace. And basically, you come out of what's called the cartoon room, or the great room, and you come into this long palace filled with tapestries. And I had an audio tour. I was listening to the audio tour as I came out, and it was actually still explaining the room that I just left. And suddenly, I felt like somebody was running down the hallway, and there was actually a ghost that ran right through me. I felt not only pushed back, but I also felt chilled. So she ran through me, and she took all the energy, all the heat energy out of my body.
Interesting. Do you determine, was it actually her, or was it another ghost? Do you know?
Oh, no, it was her.
It was her. It was definitely her. Okay.
It was definitely her because she was screaming the entire time.
Ah, okay. Actually screaming. Wow.
Yeah, and that's what's really kind of crazy is that as a medium, sometimes you can hear them, you can see them, you can feel them, you can smell them. When I've gone on paranormal investigations, I've actually been able to see them to the point where I actually sketch them out. And
nice.
And what's even kind of wacky to me is that whenever we show the sketch to the homeowner every time has said that was the ghost that they see in their house. Mm-hmm. So yes, I met Queen Catherine.
Now, I have to ask, because now we have a very up close and personal interaction with her, but because she's always screaming, mm-hmm. up and down this hallway, but you did get a chance to feel her as she went right through you. Would mm-hmm. you say? Because the actions of that seem very residual, but the fact that she went through you, is there any sort of intelligence in there at all?
That was something that I had to ponder, and
okay.
I came to the conclusion that she actually is an intelligent haunt, and she keeps, although she relives that, and other people have experienced her. She does other things too. She doesn't just stand there and run there and scream. She's been known to pull on people, pull on their clothing, especially if you stand next to one of the curtains in one of the windows in that hallway. People have actually seen a hand come out from behind the windows. Fortunately, she didn't tug at me, but running through me was quite enough for me.
Yeah, I bet.
So she doesn't just do the same thing. If she did the same thing over and over again, that would lead me to believe that it was residual, but it doesn't seem to be. And she keeps trying to get Henry to forgive her, and of course, he's long since dead. And
right.
He actually doesn't haunt the palace.
I was about to ask, any sense that he's around?
No, I didn't sense him at all. We even went to his burial place, which is in Windsor Castle. He's buried in a chapel in Windsor Castle, and although that he's reputed to haunt that chapel, I didn't sense him at all. People have said that because they hear shuffling sounds in that particular chapel, that they think it's Henry because he had a leg that was injured during a jousting incident. So they think he's dragging his leg in the chapel, and I really think that it's not him. I did get the sense that there were monks that were still there in that chapel, so I think it could have just been them shuffling their feet.
That makes sense.
Did you happen to pick up any other spirits in that particular area, or did it seem like that she was kind of the most prominent?
Well, she was the most prominent in that hallway. Hampton Court Palace is pretty big. They also have an extensive garden as well. Now, Hampton Court Palace was actually owned. It was built for Cardinal Wolsey, and Henry VIII was looking for a great palace for himself. So he actually told the cardinal that he must give him the palace. He must give Henry VIII the palace. So reluctantly, as I understand, the cardinal gave Henry VIII the palace. Now, over time, William and Mary moved into the palace a couple hundred years later, and they totally gutted and redid most of the palace. So there's not very much Tudor style inside as there was, of course, originally. A lot of it is the William Mary influence. But there are other ghosts there, certainly. There's one famous ghost that I didn't run into, but if you go into Hampton Court Palace's website, there is a video that one of the cameras caught. Have you seen that, Mike, about
No.
the hooded figure? Okay, in one of the courtyards, I think it's the Clock Court. There were security video cameras, and they were trained on a couple of the different doors. One of these doors flew open. Now, this was after hours. There was nobody there. And you could clearly see a robed figure that looked like it had hands of bone that had thrown open the doors and started walking out and then disappeared.
Oh, wow. No, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So that's on the Hampton Court Palace website.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I didn't run into him, though, which is good.
It's probably a good one. Yeah, probably a good thing. Got a question down here in the chat from Michelle Nugent. This is kind of back to Katherine Howard running through you. Does it really feel like walking through a cobweb?
To me, it actually felt like walking through a freezer instead of a cobweb, because she really sapped all of the heat out of my body just for an instant. But it was quite cold. You know, as I mentioned too in a number of my books, because I'm a meteorologist, I like to talk about energy.
Right.
And ghosts, in order to manifest, they will slow down the molecules of air, and that causes colder air because fast-moving molecules of air are warm air. So basically, there was a whole lot of cold air coming at me at the speed of a truck.
Interesting.
What was the feeling like with the Anglican monks? Because I know that Henry VIII, he really kind of split off that the Catholic side of things, because obviously with his divorces and whatnot. But him creating that Anglican aspect, was there like what was the energy like? The differences.
Well, in the chapels, it was pretty solemn, except for one particular chapel. In a cathedral in Canterbury, and I can talk about that too because I ran into somebody there. But it was pretty solemn, and for the most part, it was actually pretty peaceful, because that's where people went to achieve, peace in their faith. There were exceptions, of course, where bad things happened, but chapels for the most part were pretty quiet.
I don't know whether Mike was still looking up questions. I don't want to butt in there, Mike.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. In fact, we just got a $10 super chat from Tom McNicholas. He says to get Rob a blanket to keep him warm.
Yeah, I needed one. Actually, we went in May, and if you go to England in May, by the way, you can expect rain. Right. Which is what we got, probably about 6 or 7 days out of the entire time. But it's really amazing, though, to be in a structure that was built in the 1500s. And a lot of these castles, a number of these Tudor castles, not a lot, but a number of them were actually built on the grounds or the ruins from structures that existed in 1100 AD.
Right.
time of the Normans. So.
Yeah, they recycled a lot of material, a lot of foundations, a lot of the stonework is from back then. They used, the masonry from one building into another. So you may have a mix of different eras in a lot of these buildings. So it's really interesting. I know I've personally wanted to get out there to visit a lot of that. Shauna and I have talked about Ireland and Scotland, of course. England would be in the mix. It's right there. Just, really, it's just a fantastic piece of history. You have all the beautiful castles. So,
well, speaking of Scotland and Ireland, that's actually a book in the making right now, because we went to Scotland and Ireland, and we ran into a whole bunch more ghosts there too. So.
Did you run into William Wallace?
No.
Okay.
I did not. Is he related to you?
No. Well, maybe it's kind of, it's as close as probably we're related. But anyway, I had to throw that out there.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I personally have family ties to Scotland on the Grant side. It's down my grandfather's line, and so the Grant clan fought with Robert the Bruce during the Scottish Wars of Independence and all that. So that from a family history side I've always had an interest in, but really just the castles, the countryside, the hauntings, all of that, as well as the same thing in Ireland. So it's a fantastic area of the world.
Yeah, we actually had some Scottish as well that could have fought. Now we haven't traced it back that far, but it was the Frosts. So who knows? Maybe our families fought together back.
They may have. You never know. It's kind of funny sometimes how things come full circle. So yeah. I mean, just when I lived in Frederick, Maryland, and I started doing research for my book Ghosts of Maryland, I'd gone downtown to the Historical Society, and I met a guy there that generations and generations and generations ago. We're talking back into the 1700s. He would have been a distant cousin, So it's pretty crazy how you can run into people like that and run into other aspects of family.
But Rob, if you did get a chance, and I don't know whether you did or not, if you went to the Natural History Museum, Sir Joseph Banks, that's actually my lineage, my bloodline.
Okay, no, I didn't get there. We only toured all the Tudor places.
Have a question from the chat from Tim Schoen. Rob, have you ever investigated Belgrave Hall?
Belgrave Hall? No, we did not.
Okay.
We did not stop there. There were quite a few more entities that of interest, by the way, in Hampton Court Palace. So one I want to mention that I concluded was actually a spirit, which is in my mind, a spirit is one who has crossed over and comes back from time to time, and a ghost is earthbound. That's the way I define them.
Okay.
So Hampton Court Palace noted that Jane Seymour, one of Henry's queens, who died in October, has been known to come back only during the month of October, has been seen the month of October. So I think it was October 1537 that she passed away.
Okay.
So Hampton Court Palace says that it's her ghost. Well, I kind of dispute that, because what I've found is that spirits of our loved ones usually come back on birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. So Jane is only seen during the month of her passing, and that's also the birth of her son.
Okay.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, so I don't think she's there, because even when I was there, I didn't even sense her, and she's often seen in what's called the Silver Stick Staircase there. So if anybody goes to visit, look for that place, and that's where she's often seen at the at the top of the stairs. So one of the interesting things when you go to any of these castles, if you're brave enough, is to talk to the docents.
If you're brave enough.
If you're brave enough,
why is that?
It's not about being brave to experience the ghost, but well, because sometimes when you go to places like this, they don't like to talk about hauntings. But Hampton Court Palace,
the Hampton Court is one that's notorious for it.
Yes, they are. So Hampton Court is the place to talk about hauntings.
Real quick, Andrew Cox, $20 super chat. Really thank you very much, Andrew. So Tom and Andrew, thank you. Paracon 2018, ready to go ghosting, buddy. So, all right. Thank you, Andrew. So, okay, go ahead and continue, Rob.
I think I was talking about docents.
Yeah, you were talking about docents.
So one of the docents that was on the tour, his name was Stuart, and I asked him if he ever had a paranormal encounter, and he was actually nice enough to bring us to the room where he actually saw a shadow run across the room as he was talking to a group. He was talking to a group of people, and he watched this shadow figure basically run behind people and exit out a window.
Oh, wow.
So I caught a video. I actually had him tell his story on video, and I have
a
link to it on my page. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. It's not often that I think that quickly, but I did in that particular case.
That's good. That's good. Hey, we have a question here from Donna Gorton. She asks, do you find it easier or harder to communicate to human spirits compared to animals?
No, it's pretty much the same for me, but I have to confess that I do prefer talking to animals than people. So so that's thanks for the plug. That I wrote those two books, Pets in the Afterlife and Pets in the Afterlife 2, that Mike and I have talked about extensively. Right.
Yeah, we've talked about Pets in the Afterlife a few times on here. So, but we are talking tonight about Ghosts of England, Encounters on a Medium's Vacation. So now you said that you and Tom were following the Tudor dynasty. So where else did you venture off to on this journey?
Well, we did go to Canterbury Cathedral, and you may know Canterbury from the Canterbury Tales, from Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. And if you haven't read it, you should. There's some bawdy humor in it. It's pretty funny. Have either of you guys read the Canterbury Tales?
I think I read. I think I read it in college, but I can't remember what was in the book. I mean, I'd have to go back.
Okay. Well, I'm inspiring you to go back and go look. Actually, I have to go back and go look myself because I've read it in college also. So anyway, we went to Canterbury Cathedral, and if you've never been there, it's a pretty amazing place. Canterbury Cathedral dates back to the year 597. It's actually the oldest church in England still in use today. So it was pretty impressive, actually, to just stand on a location that has been in use continually since 597. So, of course, I went in there, and I had no idea about the history of it or anything. And as soon as I walked in the cathedral, I got the sense of a man, a ghost, and he was actually very headstrong and quite arrogant. And he was almost like a bully. And I wondered, who in the world could this be in a church, in a cathedral? It could have been anybody, especially because the history goes back so far. But he led me over to an area, and the area that he led me to had a marker that said Thomas. It was Thomas Becket.
Oh, interesting.
Now, Thomas Becket was a friend of Henry, I think it was Henry II. And they were very close. They were actually they went hunting together and so forth. And he was a man of the cloth. And when the Archbishop passed away, Henry II arranged for Thomas Becket to take his place, basically. So Thomas Becket kind of owed Henry. Well, then once he got in that position, he didn't agree with Henry on a number of things, and he was very vocal about it. So Henry sent 4 men into the church, and apparently they surprised him when he was praying, and they murdered him. And he still is reputed to walk around in there. But I was pretty taken aback by him. As soon as I walked through the door, he let me know he was there. And again, what I thought was interesting is that his attitude was so brusque, so abrasive. Yeah. So that got me thinking after I left the cathedral. I thought, well, I guess now I can understand why Henry II really didn't like him after all.
Nice. That's
now, was he killed by one of the Crusaders?
I think so. I can't remember exactly. You're asking me to go into the history that is a little beyond me.
So I just I do understand some world history. My expertise or whatever is in like Vietnam and beyond, but I sense that it was some like knight with a long beard is what I'm sensing. But man, I couldn't imagine walking in and then him coming right to you and then showing you that. That's amazing.
Yeah, that kind of freaked me out because I certainly, again, whenever I've gone into any of these places, I certainly didn't expect anybody to come up to me, let alone guide me to where I could figure out their identity.
Right.
So that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And kind of on that note, as far as your abilities as a medium, we do have a question from Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast. And he asked, I would like to know Rob's story and how he discovered having the gift of a medium. How did he go about that? And what did you think when you came to the conclusion that you had the gift? So a little of your backstory.
Okay. Well, that goes back quite a while. I'm not going to tell you my age, but it goes back quite a while. Basically, it happened when I was a teenager. I kind of figured it out. And Mike, of course, you've heard this story quite a number of times. But when I was a teenager, about 6 months after my grandfather died, he appeared to me in full color. I was the only one home with our family dog. And, of course, it freaked me out. So I grabbed the dog and ran outside. And when my parents came home, I talked to my mother and father about it. It was very close to my mother and father. And my mother wasn't surprised, so that gave me a clue that something was going on. It turns out she had the ability. My grandfather had the ability, and somebody else in the family had the ability, a cousin. So she told me about that, and she was afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of it. I was afraid, of course, I was startled in that particular instance. But over time, I got messages from different relatives, never anybody outside the family, which is kind of odd, until probably 2000 and around the year 1999-2000, wherein I actually lived in a haunted house, not by my choosing. It was in Bowling Green, Kentucky, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Margaret Ehrlich is down in the chat. So, hi, Margaret. How you doing?
Doesn't she have to go to bed?
Oh, it's great of her to stop in for a moment.
I know. I'm just kidding.
So, Margaret heads up Inspired Ghost Tracking out there in Maryland, which Rob is a part of. So, great group. Great group. I've had the pleasure of investigating with you guys a few times.
Talk about portals, Rob, because I got a feeling that the portals sometimes even open up when you least expect it, in different areas. So I want your take on portals, because I'm interested, because I too tend to, I don't know whether it's because I unconsciously open them or whatever, but I want your insight on portals.
Okay. To me, portals are basically doorways that go from one place to another that enable an entity to come through. I've found, like in the Belmont Manor, where Margaret Ehrlich and I do investigations up in Maryland, that there is a portal. There are two portals there. There's one in the house and there's one in the cemetery, and that enables one of the ghosts, the earthbound ghosts, to move between the house and the cemetery, because I believe that ghosts are usually fixed to a place, and that's a portal is a way that they can move. And I know that before we went on, Chuck, that we talked about the portal that I ran into in the Tower of London. So we can talk about that, but I want to hear a little bit about your experience with portals.
Well, it's interesting because, all the way, in my development or whatever, originally I thought, this had to be some curse or something that was taking place. But every one of my locations that I lived in, in the past, 10 to 15 years, every one of them, I kind of thought it was haunted. Where in retrospect, I look at it as, maybe this is a portal or a doorway for these wayward spirits to come and communicate with me versus the other side of things. And, I've noticed that. And sometimes you can see it, like plain as day outside. You can see the makeup of, the picture distorting, of what you're seeing. And, yeah, I've always been interested in that. But, sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad. Obviously, I've dealt with, certain cases that have been really bad, and I've helped them close them. But, is it possible that I've just subconsciously opened these things at, pretty much every one of my residences?
Well, it takes energy to generate, because I've learned that portals are basically energy doorways, and we've actually measured. To me, a portal is like a sideways hurricane. I'm going to use a weather analogy here. It's a rotating area of energy. And at the Belmont Mansion, Inspired Ghost Tracking has been able to actually time how long it takes for a certain point of energy to rotate by putting an electrical device on the floor, and we watched it light up within like every 30 seconds. It was a motion detector kind of thing. So there are other kinds of portals, though. There are portals to what I think are a dark place. We've gone into investigations where people have used Ouija boards, and they've opened a portal to really bad things. And the people in the house all came down with illnesses. So yeah, there are different types of portals, but I think that they're all energy related.
Mike, I'm going to have to steal your buddy to come on my show here down the road, my friend, because we have a lot more to talk about. This is great.
No, Rob is full of all kinds of information. He's a great guy.
I'm full of something.
Yeah, that's what people say about me. No, but anyway, Rob, I love your energy. I appreciate it, my friend. And it's not always when mediums get together where you can appreciate that kind of energy. But yeah, a lot of respect for you.
Thank you, Chuck. I feel the same.
So, got a couple of things from the chat here.
Okay.
We'll get back to portals in a second, but just because I'm backtracking a little bit here. Talking about Anne Boleyn. Chipper Terry saying, Anne, along with all the other nobles that were executed, were buried in the Chapel of St. Peter, which is also reported to be haunted. Did Rob get to visit?
I did. As a matter of fact, I was just about to bring up the Tower of London, because that's where I ran into a portal.
See, it all ties together.
So I can talk about Anne Boleyn first, or I can talk about the portal, whichever one you want me to go with.
Well, you can use the portal to segue into Anne Boleyn. How about that?
I'll go through the portal to get to Anne Boleyn.
There you go.
Okay. So a little bit about the Tower of London. The Tower of London has been there also since about 1100 AD. It was actually constructed, I think it's on the north side of the Thames River. And, of course, there was nothing but flat land on the other side of the river. And it was built so that it was basically an imposing thing to show that this was a structure of power, This is where the power is. This is where everybody should take note that that they shouldn't try to attempt to cross to the north of the river. Anyway, so over time, the Tower of London was used as a palace and then as a prison. It was actually used in World War II to help with injured people from the bombings, because England suffered bombings during World War II. There's a lot of mystery, of course, in the Tower of London, and there are a number of ghosts. So with that, you can walk freely around the Tower of London, and it's quite a big place. There are quite a number of towers within the Tower of London. It's actually kind of a misnomer, because it's not a tower. It's actually like a palace.
Right. It's a castle. Right.
Yeah, it's a castle. So it's confusing because of the name. So one of the towers is called the Salt Tower, and as Tom and I were walking into it, we opened this giant wooden door, and you can walk through there because there's some displays in each part of the castle. And as we walked through there, we came in one behind the other. We both heard a really loud humming, and we felt almost like an electrical feeling as we walked through this doorway. Now, there was nothing electrical in this entire tower. It was just stone. Mm-hmm. With windows. There wasn't even a display in this tower. So we realized that we had walked through a portal that was just closing. It was probably one of the weirdest experiences I've ever endured. We weren't able to find out where the other doorway was, though, the other portal. Okay. But I'm sure there's plenty of them in there because there's so many ghosts in there.
That's interesting. So you caught it as it was closing.
As it was closing, yep. Yeah, I even felt it as it was closing. Mm-hmm. So hadn't had that experience before. So now I'll walk you over to St. Peter's, which is the church that is right outside of St. Peter's is the Tower Green, where all the executions happened, including that of Anne Boleyn. So St. Peter's was actually the first stop on the speaking tour. We all lined up with a group, and we went in, and the docent, who was dressed as a beefeater, said, "Just file in the church and sit in a pew, and we'll talk about stuff." As soon as I walked in, I immediately sensed that there was a woman, there was a female ghost in there, and she was kind of walking with me. Okay. What I didn't know was that Anne Boleyn was buried in there. Her body was actually moved once. It was buried and then it was moved. And I think that Henry hated her so much that he had them put lime in with her body, which dissolves bones.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty
harsh.
Yeah.
I know he tried to erase every remnant of her, out of the kingdom. And it's like there's a couple of rare occurrences where you can see a little remnant of the fact that she had been there, or if there's an insignia that got overlooked. But yeah, he pretty much just tried to have her wiped out.
Yeah, it was pretty harsh.
Yeah,
but she does walk. She does walk through the chapel, though.
Okay.
She absolutely is there. Of course, there are others there too, but she's the most famous.
Yeah, she's definitely famous, even today. So
yeah, but experiencing that energy. I mean, it had to have felt a lot lighter because she was kind of an amazing human being on the earth.
Yeah, she was. It was, but I kept feeling sadness, though. A lot of, and this is before I knew who it even was. as I mentioned before, when you go in churches, sometimes you get like a peaceful feeling. Although people did go to churches who are desperate, who were sick, who were sad, but this was definitely a very heavy pall of sadness.
Yeah. We have a question specifically about portals from Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast. So I was wondering about proof of portals. Why not simply think that spirits nearby are attracted to whatever you are doing? Why a portal? Where's the proof?
Well, as I mentioned before, there's a feeling of electrical energy, and it feels like it's rotating. And I mentioned also too that we were able to actually time the rotation in the Belmont Manor of the portal. So, and as a medium, I can actually see portals sometimes.
Okay.
So, I have to go with what I get.
Right.
It's not an exact science.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, what is an exact science in any of this that we do, of course.
Sure.
Phoenix Feather also asked, do you think portals can be used to open the past, like old-timers showing themselves? So I guess being able to see the past.
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think they just use as a doorway. But what I have encountered, though, is some ghosts who will actually show me how a room was set when they lived. And I've encountered that in a number of places. And actually, when we were in England, I mentioned some of that. I mentioned that a couple of times to the docents, and they said, "Yeah, how did you know that this was over there?" And because there's that particular kind of piece of furniture or whatever is not even in this room, so ghosts will actually show you.
Okay. Yeah, the portal questions are still coming, so we have a couple others. Pungai Fungi, so where do these portals lead to? And from what you've kind of described here, you're not exactly sure. Like you witnessed one closing, but you're not really sure where it went. You're pretty sure the one set up at Belmont, but other ones, you're like, well, there's one here, but I don't know where it goes. So how do you deduce?
Oh, you just have to be lucky enough to run into the second one, really.
Okay.
And they could be anywhere. I mean, a portal could be in like an attic that we can't get into, or it could be in the corner of a basement, or it could be outside somewhere where a structure used to be that doesn't stand anymore. So it's the luck of the draw. Unless you can actually physically see it, and it's rare to see it. Yeah.
There is a question here from Jen K about can anyone catch a portal on cam? And I'll throw in it wasn't my photograph, but I've seen one at a cemetery that I've visited before, and it was an interesting phenomenon. So this one wasn't necessarily round, it was more rectangular, and basically it almost looked like a doorway opening where this bush was, and you could actually see like a room inside. It was really kind of interesting. Not manipulated at all, the photo. So
wow.
Yeah, so to me that seemed like, okay, that looks like it's probably a photograph of a portal. So I don't know. I don't know for sure if that is or not, but it's one of those you chalk up to, that's extremely interesting.
Well, I'm sure there's plenty of them everywhere. It's just that we don't see them.
Yeah.
And as far as where it leads, I mean, I've seen multiple dimensions. You know what I mean, through some of my sessions and different places that I've seen. So if there are multiple dimensions, then there's got to be multiple portals to different, dimensions themselves.
So Tammy Heitzman is asking, kind of like that, the dimension aspect, aren't portals like a thin veil between our world and theirs?
They can be, sure. As we mentioned, you can have a portal to a dark place, also. So, ghosts can use portals on Earth. There are portals to dark places. There are portals to other worlds. It's unknown, all of the different places that they can go to. If I knew, I'd write a book.
I think we opened a whole can of worms with the portal thing. There's just
I guess
a lot of questions, which is great. We always enjoy questions from our Mad Hatters down there.
Well, I can take you back to London if you wish. One of the things that everybody likes to do when you go to London is to sit back and have a pint. So we went into a pub called Lord Moon of the Mall, and that's in that's near Trafalgar Square. We didn't expect to find anybody in there. Of course, we just went in there for lunch or whatever, and sure enough, there was a ghost. Actually, there were quite a few ghosts. It wasn't always a pub, and the gentleman who was the haunt there actually told me what he did, and he was very active, kind of running around there. And when I sensed him, I took a couple of pictures, by the way, of the bar, if you will. And the first picture I took when I came in, there was nothing there. The second picture I took had a couple of orbs in it. Now, a lot of people don't take stock in orbs. I don't, unless I see colors and designs in them, in even maybe a face. So that's how I know it's an orb. If it's white, it's a reflection or bug, pollen, whatever, or light. But all of these orbs that came out in my picture had colors and designs in them. And it's inside, so it's not moisture. And they showed up when I sensed that there were a couple of ghosts in there. So if you happen to be near Trafalgar Square, go into Lord Moon of the Mall, and you can find a couple of people to have lunch with that you might not hear, but you'll be able to sense them.
Nice. So, what were some of your other hotspots while you were there? It seems like you hit a lot of different places.
Well, we did. I mentioned Hampton Court Palace, the Tower of London. Those are two really big ones. We went to Canterbury. We went to Stratford-upon-Avon. Stratford-upon-Avon is known as the birthplace of William Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. And his house actually still stands.
Those are really? Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing that it does. And so does his daughter's house. Now, in his house, there was nothing but residual energy. So in her house, though, his daughter's house, there were two ghosts in there. And they, one of the ghosts was a man. As it turned out, he gave me his name as I walked in, and it turned out to be the husband of Shakespeare's daughter. And he also, as soon as I walked in, he made me feel strong chest pain and told me that he died of a heart attack. Oh. Ghosts often will convey the way that they died, the pain of death. So he gave me a couple of other things to clue me into his identity, which I was able to figure out by the time I walked through the whole place, talked to some docents. Mm-hmm. So they were those ghosts. We also visited Sudeley Castle. And there was another ghost in there. And the Mary Rose Museum, which just opened in 2013. Do you know what the Mary Rose is, Mike?
Can't say that I do.
Do you know, Chuck?
Uh-uh.
The Mary Rose was a ship that Henry VIII had built for his fleet. And that ship got caught in it was in battle. It got caught in a really strong gust of wind, and it capsized, and it sunk. And half of the ship, it actually landed on its side on the bottom of the seafloor.
Wow.
and I think it's sunk southwest of Portsmouth, which is in the southwestern corner of England. And so I think it was back in the 80s that the ship was found, or half the ship was found sticking out of sand. And then a massive project went underway to bring the ship, to raise the ship. And then once they did, they built a museum around it.
Nice.
That museum, and now they're actually cleaning it up, and what they're doing is they're filling the boards with some kind of plastic or polymer so that it maintains its shape. And they found, of course, tons of artifacts.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I bet.
So if you get a chance to go to England, definitely visit the Mary Rose Museum, because it is amazing to see a ship from Henry VIII's time.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
There's an exhibit too where they actually have some skeletons of some of the crew, and they had forensic reconstruction of what these crew members actually look like.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, really fascinating. And of course, my favorite one was a dog named Hatch. They had a dog on the ship named Hatch. So, and he was a mixed breed.
Okay.
But,
cool. It sounds like a great one to visit. Got a question here from Tom McNicholas. He asks, why are bars or pubs generally always haunted in London?
Well, that's where you find spirits of many kinds.
Right.
I couldn't let that go.
Oh, you had to take advantage of that one.
It's where people have a good time, and ghosts will often stay behind in places that they enjoy or they love, or where they died. And sometimes you'll find ghosts, people who elect to stay behind because they loved the pub that they used to go to.
Yeah,
that's the only reasoning I can come up with.
Yeah, I mean, I usually chalk it up to anything like that where somebody may have a good memory, a fond memory, or what have you. That's where they want to go. That's where they want to attach themselves to. People have asked me stuff. Even like a school. Chuck, I know you're a teacher, but why would a spirit or a ghost be at a school? It's like, well, depending on how their life was, they had a lot of friends there, so maybe that's the place where they had the best times of their life that they wanted to hang out at. And maybe if they're a little bit older, if they were on a sports team or whatever, maybe they were in the gym or what have you. There's different reasons, but usually it's like that where they have fond memories, whether that's drinking or whatever it is they're doing. So, So
I had a couple of highlights in the book that are my favorite chapters we haven't even talked about yet.
Yeah, let's get into it. I've got a few minutes.
One of them was about a haunted room that I stayed in. I stayed in what I guess it's called the luxury bed and breakfast. It's the ruins of Thornbury Castle. Now, Thornbury Castle was a castle that was built, I think, by the Duke of Gloucester, and he fell out of favor with Henry VIII, who, of course, wound up executing him and taking his castle. Well, the castle was never finished, so it looks like it fell apart. Parts of it fell apart, but it didn't. It was just never completed. The parts that are there, the completed parts, have been turned into a bed and breakfast. And this castle actually was a place that Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, when she was queen, went and would stay. And we had a couple of instances in this particular castle. So when you go into a bed and breakfast, you don't anticipate having a ghost in there, but in this particular case, we really had to actually solve the mystery, and I didn't actually solve the mystery probably about until 6 months later after I came home, because I needed to figure out who this person was that was in our room. When both of us came into the room, the first thing we did is we looked at each other, and Tom has abilities too. He's also a medium on inspired ghost tracking. We said, there is a man in this room. There is the ghost of a man in this room. And we wanted to figure out who he was. But as soon as we checked in, we were hungry, so we said, okay, we'll get back to it when we come back. As we were leaving the room, we stopped and paused for a picture outside the door. You know, they're giant wooden doors. They probably weigh about 200 pounds. So we thought it'd be kind of cute to, you know, pause, take a picture outside that door. When I took a picture, when he took a picture of me, there was nothing. When I took a picture of him, there was an orb with colors and designs in it. And we knew, you know, we had sensed that the ghost was standing on the other side of the door. So we thought, okay, we'll see what happens when we come back. Well, when we come back, the ghost was still there. We both sensed him. And I wanted to get a clue to his identity. I decided I was going to take a shower. And, you know, water energy really helps give ghosts a little more power so that they can pass messages on. So I heard the name Rupert, and I thought, okay, well, that's his first name. Who the heck is Rupert? I later figured out exactly who he was, and he actually was an historic figure. And I tied him into a battle that was raging there. Oh, wow. And I'm not going to give it away. You can read it in the book. But the interesting thing is that when we were inside, we took another picture where we sensed him standing, and there was another orb. And so I said to him, "Okay, Rupert, I know you're here. All I want to ask you is that you do not wake us up in the middle of the night. Please wait until the sun rises."
Nice.
So now it had one big window, and the window had an iron grate that was locked. It was locked from the inside. And at 5:30 in the morning, I didn't remember that the sun came up at 5:30. The iron grate slammed open against the wall of the castle.
Oh, wow.
It was locked.
Interesting.
So he listened, and he woke us up when the sun came up. Stupid me, because I should have said, "Don't wake me up until 7."
Right. Yeah, that's a little early.
Yeah, so that was actually physical proof that he was in there.
Yeah.
Another odd thing that the mattress in this room was really thick, and it looked really comfortable, but neither one of us had a good night's sleep at all. We kept it really felt like we were sleeping on the floor with hay, like or sleeping on boards, wooden boards with hay. So what I came to realize is that the ghost, Rupert, was actually sharing his experience of how he would sleep, you know, how he felt when he was sleeping, like on the battlefield or whatever. And what's kind of funny is that when we get back, we actually told this story to our travel agent who put the trip together, and she actually called Thornbury Castle, and she said, "You know what? These guys had a great stay, but the bed was horrible." And they went up and they tested the bed, and they said, "There is nothing wrong with this bed. These mattresses are brand new, and they're like, it's like a foot thick of padding." Mm-hmm. So we knew it was the ghost. And in the book, I actually explain how I went about figuring out exactly what his identity was. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, we're actually right at about our hour mark. Can you believe that?
No.
Yeah, it went by quick. So, Rob, why don't you go ahead and let everybody know where they can find your book? There it is again.
Okay. My books are available on Amazon.com in paperback and ebook. And you can look me up on robgutro.com or petspirits.com if that's easier. And I have a blog and Facebook page, Twitter, all that stuff.
Yeah, you have a great blog. You and every Friday, Rob reposts one of our older Friday Night Ghost Rights, which is fantastic. Really do appreciate that.
Sure, and actually, Mike, coming up, I'm going to be reposting one of your videos about you're talking about your dog, your childhood dog.
Oh, okay.
It's already in the queue.
It's already in the queue. Okay, yeah. When Nikki talked to me, that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So, that was really interesting.
I wish we had more time. I didn't even get to talk about my most amazing paranormal experience in England.
Well, why don't we do that real quick? Because Donna Gordon asked. Yeah. Was there any time you felt truly scared? Maybe not scared, but whatever your most significant experience was.
Well, that would not be the most amazing experience, but the only time I was actually the only time I was startled really is when Tom and I both experienced the same thing at the same time. We were in Westminster Abbey, and this is actually where Tom's abilities awakened for the first time. We were looking at the tomb of Anne of Cleves, who was another one of Henry's wives.
Yeah, one of the only ones that survived.
Yeah, and well, he said she was as ugly as a horse. So, his words, not mine. And besides, she was dead, so I didn't see her. So anyway, Tom and I were standing about 20 feet apart, and we were both facing the tomb of Anne of Cleves. And at the same exact time, my hair was pulled on the left-hand side. His hair was pulled on the right-hand side. He was to the left of me. It was almost as if someone with 20-foot-long arms reached between the two of us and pulled our hair at the same time. And we immediately looked at each other and we said, "Did you feel that? Did you feel that?" And I said, "What did you feel?" And he said, "Somebody pulled my hair." And I said, "Damn it, somebody pulled my hair too."
Oh, wow. So
that was really startling.
Yeah.
I've never had my hair pulled before, but to be 20 feet apart and
both have them pulled.
Yeah, at the same time. That was kind of freaky.
Hey, Tom McNicholas down in the chat says, "I just bought the book, The Ghosts of England." There you go.
Oh, well, thank you. I hope you enjoy it. I really I met a lot of interesting ghosts there, and I hope it inspires you to take a trip there too, because there's so much to see and do there, and the history itself is a fantastic education.
Yeah, a lot of bucket list items there for sure.
I'm going back.
Well,
there's more dead people to talk to too. So.
All right, well, let's get into our shout outs real quick. Now, don't go anywhere, because directly after this show is Inside the Upside Down. We're going to do a special on EVPs, requests from Tom McNicholas, one of our Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. So, well, you got the info on Rob's book, because you guys are already buying it, which is great. All right, so I do want to thank Chuck for co-hosting again, and Shauna, our chat shenanigator, down there in the chat. Margaret Ehrlich from Inspired Ghost Tracking is down there. So anybody out there in Maryland, the surrounding area, go check out Inspired Ghost Tracking. They do a lot of fantastic stuff, all the time. So great events and talks and all kinds of stuff going on. So let's see, Cheryl Midkiff, Jen K, Tammy Heitzman. Thank you all very much. We need to get to the Super Chat Superstars. Tom McNicholas and Andrew Cox. Thank you guys very much for the Super Chats this evening. Always really, really appreciated. And there's Chuck with Beyond the Light Paranormal Network, or Beyond the Light Network. So we do simulcast here. Of course, the primary feed is YouTube, but we're also on Spreaker with Beyond the Light Network, which is Chuck's group there, and then we're also down there on Periscope as well. So thank you all wherever you are watching or listening. B3 Aerospace, another one of our Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. Lynn's White, thank you very much. Let's see, Chipper Terry, thanks again. Kala Spears, Thank you again for joining us tonight. M. Labuda61, thank you as always. Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast. Thank you for all of your questions tonight. I'm tongue-tied, I know. Just my mouth is dry. Got to get some water, right?
You need some English tea, Mike.
Some English tea. I am going to get some tea after this or something. I got to wake up. I still got the bags under my eyes. They were even saying in chat, Mike looks tired. I know. Donna Gordon, one of our Cheshire Cats, thank you for joining us and fielding some of the questions this evening down there. Zippy Davis, always one of the first ones in. Thank you, Zippy, another one of our Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. Psychic Jen B, thanks for joining us tonight. Bethany Warner, thank you again. Fungi, thanks for all the questions again tonight. Always appreciated. And I know we had a lot of people. Denise Pridemore, thank you for joining us tonight. And there's Tom, Zippy, Lenora Martinez, thank you very much. And Phoenix Feather, thanks for the questions. I know you had some good ones in there. Robert White from Australia, thank you for joining us again. And I know I got a lot of these. Let me scroll all the way down. And if I missed anybody, again, it's nothing personal. It's just there's a lot of you guys in the chat, and it's sometimes hard to keep up with. Diane Hilbert, as always, thank you very much. And Discord Threads, thank you as well. And I think we are going to wrap it up at that. Again, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Check out Rob's books. All of them are fantastic. And there is always more coming out from him. Check out his blog too. There's always great stuff there. So for Rob Gutro, Chuck Banks, Shauna down in the chat, we thank you very much. And stay tuned inside the Upside Down coming up next. Take care.